You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact. Yes, we really have run out of other things to talk about. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This time we have been watching The Wounded. It was a story by Stuart Charnell, Sarah Charmel and Cy Chermak, with a teleplay by Jerry Taylor. It was directed by Chip Chalmers. It first aired the week of January the 28th, 1991. James, what happens in this one?
The Enterprise is patrolling the Cardassian border when it's attacked by a Cardassian vessel in contravention of the recent peace treaty. The Cardassians reveal that a Federation starship has been attacking Cardassian vessels. Picard is ordered to work alongside the Cardassians to investigate and to keep the peace at all costs. They track down Benjamin Maxwell, the renegade captain of the Phoenix, who claims the Cardassians are building up their weapons reserves with a view to restarting the war. With help from O'Brien, who previously served with Maxwell, they bring the starship back to Federation space, but was there truth in his claims?
Yes. Alex, you'd never seen this episode before, so what did you think of it?
Well, when it started, I had to message the two of you and say, I think I've chosen the wrong episode because I think I've already seen everything that's happening. And I discovered, no, it was another episode. An episode that was half very dull and then half fine. It definitely improved past the first, 15 minutes. But for those opening 15 minutes, I regretted coming back. But in the end, no, it was enjoyable.
Well, we did just follow Data's Day, which was all about O'Brien's wedding, and then we jumped straight on to The Wounded.
6 months ago when we recorded Data's Day.
Well, that was the thing. So there was that sense of deja vu, and not the episode deja vu, of which I couldn't tell you what that was about.
I think it's Deja Q.
There's an episode called Deja Vu as well, isn't there?
No, it's Deja Q.
Well, God knows what episodes I'm generating in my mind. But yeah, it was the scene of them sat down eating, and I thought, I'm sure I've seen this before.
Well, I guess that there was a tedious plot with Chief O'Brien in the previous episode.
Tedious is the word.
It's an interesting thing because he's obviously, this is the newlywed couple that we saw in the last episode, and they're having interactions basically as if they've never met before or actually discussed any aspects of their life before this point.
Yes, it does feel that they have never shared a breakfast. Not a euphemism.
I'm not a fish.
Before they got married, they didn't live together.
That's fair. That's very nice.
But surely they've shared a meal.
What? You would share a meal with a woman before you married her? Kind of person are you to do such a thing?
Do you know, and it's quite, I mean, maybe I'm being petty, but you know, my wife, she's vegetarian, and I often eat different things from her, and you think in this future where you can basically conjure up anything in a matter of seconds, you don't really have to share the same meal. I know it's probably nice too, but you don't have to. But maybe that's just a loving, good thing to do, is to say, I'll have a potato casserole. Was that what it was?
Well, so he starts off by saying, "Have you never had eggs and corned beef for breakfast?" And I sit there thinking, Christ, no, corned beef for breakfast, no. I'm sure that is a thing in some region, and I'm just raising someone's blood pressure, but I have never looked at corned beef and gone, I'll start my day on that. But then he starts going on about, what about scalloped potatoes, mutton shanks, oxtails and cabbage for breakfast?
But isn't it good? Or isn't it fascinating that in the future that cultures have remained so distinct that
and then she turns around to him and says, "Oh, kind of heavy." And you go, "Well, it'll be all that cabbage."
I don't want to eat any of that. I don't want to eat the kelp buds, plankton loaf, and sea berries, and I certainly don't want to eat any of Chief O'Brien's selections. But anyway,
can we not have some Cocoa Pops? What kind of future is this? I just want a Pop-Tart.
Do the replicators have branded foods? You know, could you get a Big Mac from a replicator?
Copyright. Even in the far future, McDonald's lawyers.
There's just a big queue of starships at the drive-thru.
Yeah. Unfortunately, due to galactic lockdown, none of the drive-thrus have been open for quite some time.
They could have a refreshing Sluggo Cola.
Oh, of course. The brand that made it into Star Trek 2009. J.J. Abrams' trademark brand. Hilarious stuff.
I do feel like this is perhaps an unnecessary conversation to put into this episode. I mean, theirs, not ours, but I mean, maybe both applies. But it does feel like we're going through exactly the same thing we went through previously. Just, you know, previously we didn't have the euphemism of the phrase, she handled real meat, she touched it and cut it.
Well, anyway, I guess the meat of this plot is the introduction of the Cardassians, a new race to Star Trek who have apparently been at war with the Federation for quite some time, going back to the Stargazer days. That's apparently the last time Picard was in that area of space. Chief O'Brien is a veteran of this war, so it's kind of a big deal, and it seems like peace has just been found. We've never seen it, we've never heard of it. Do you think they pull that off in the episode? Do you think they make them feel like a race that's been around for a while in this universe?
Well, they turned up and I broke out laughing. For two reasons. One, the most horrific brace that I've seen in years around the head. Mm-hmm. And two, that their uniforms appear to be muddled out of chocolate. If you've ever been to a Cadbury's factory, they sell you bags of misshapen bits of chocolate that they can't do anything else with, so they sell them at a discount price. Yeah, it reminded me of that.
Well, a lot of this is down to first appearance weirdness. So a lot of the things here will not come back. The Cardassians are one of the cornerstones of Deep Space Nine, so this is setting up a lot of that kind of stuff that will be carried over.
The weird thing is, it feels like it's been written intentionally to set something up, but actually it's all just a one-off episode.
Yeah.
Because even down to having O'Brien be an integral part of the episode, which of course he then became a main character in Deep Space Nine, it all feels very intentional. Except, of course, the fact that Cardassians don't have facial hair.
And they don't wear those weird things over their heads. And Kanar is pronounced Kanar here, which is just all wrong.
Oh, you see, that's a brand of Kanar.
Oh, I didn't know. Is that like basically the sort of the Pepsi of Kanar?
Yeah, it's the roller cola of Kanar.
That's probably all you can get out of a replicator, isn't it? Now, there's a very good outtake that you can find on YouTube or anywhere that's from this episode, and it's of the Cardassian at the bar, and those costumes are the noisiest rubbery things in the world, and they never stop squeaking, and you've got this very sort of serious scene playing and just this very squeaky man, and that's quite funny, but that's maybe why they changed in the future. But yeah, so I guess you've got Chief O'Brien, who hasn't had much of a personality up until this point, but his personality seems to be as a major suck-up and a sort of broken soldier. Oh, I've served with the two of the best captains in all of the Federation. Yeah.
It does seem strange that they suddenly want to make O'Brien a main character. Give him so much material when they have this big cast who there's not really enough stories to go around to even just them.
Do you know, I thought that watching this episode, and I thought, do you know what? O'Brien actually gets more to do and more depth than Geordie's probably had in 4 years of this show. He actually gets a bit more meat to play with than a lot of the characters will ever get during the entire run. I mean, Beverly basically gets, I don't know, like 3 episodes where she's the lead, and O'Brien's...
One of those is she falls in love with a ghost.
Yeah. All to come. But yeah, it is interesting that the focus here is on O'Brien, when it easily could have been Riker served with this captain. I mean, he'll get his own chance to serve with his old bad captain, but
twice.
It does feel a bit like, why have we given this to O'Brien? Could it be that because he's a recurring character, not one of the main ones, they can actually break him down a bit and make him a little less palatable, perhaps?
I just assumed all the rest of the cast had holiday to use up. Because they're conspicuously absent after the initial scenes for most of the episode.
Do you really feel that this does something to O'Brien's character that makes him less palatable than the main crew? If anything, it gives him depth and makes you understand him as a person more than, the likes of Crusher and Geordie. All we've had with Geordie up to now is he's fallen in love with a hologram.
Your characters in Star Trek, in this era of Star Trek, have kind of got to be whiter than white in some ways, and he's basically describing that he's got post-traumatic stress. And I don't know, is that something you want to burden one of your main characters with?
It worked with Picard.
What do you mean?
No, it worked with Picard in Best of Both Worlds and Family.
I was very disappointed to see that when the Admiral phoned him, he didn't declare that Picard was guilty of sheer hubris. I mean, what kind of show is this? There's no edge.
Yeah, they should have said, we need to kick those Cardassian asses.
And no one had their eyes taken out. I mean,
what is this show?
It's behind the times.
It's way behind the times. But I think there's something to be said that this is a Star Trek show where we're it's accused of being this very clean cut, everything's perfect. But here we have people who have fought a war, who have seen lost, who have been forced to kill just through necessity and self-defense, have been traumatized, have lost family members because of it, have an enemy, and they're trying to reconcile this with this future way of thinking, with this humanity. And this is a great demonstration of Roddenberry's Star Trek: The Next Generation future, because nobody's meant to want to feel revenge and nobody's meant to feel that kind of loss. But here we have Chief O'Brien, and he talks it out. He doesn't go to the counsellor, he doesn't go to anything like that. But you have him talking with his wife saying, some people I think don't like the Cardassians, when he's just had that scene where he's been hostile to them. And I think that's I think that's really well played, because he knows that he's not supposed to act that way because humanity's moved on. And so it's just that way of the writers taking this world and trying to process it in a human way rather than saying, nah, none of that stuff mattered. It actually, I think, is a really interesting way to play that. It keeps the world intact, but then lets us process these particular traumas and events.
This does feel like the type of episode that maybe could have done, and I can't even believe I'm saying this, that could have done with more Troy. She's the counsellor. She's the person who people should be coming to with these problems to talk through. But maybe it says something about O'Brien that he doesn't want to talk through these issues.
I think as far as he's concerned, he doesn't really have a problem. And he does get developed into sort of maybe a grumpier character and a bit more grizzled in Deep Space Nine. But here it's interesting because he does the right thing. He's polite but quite unpleasant. But in the bar scene later on with the Cardassian, he explains why he's acted. He apologises. He is relatively calm. He's not vengeful. And it's quite interesting in this episode how they're framing the Cardassians in some ways, because I feel from this point onwards, every Cardassian you meet is basically a variation of an asshole. But like here they are trying to mellow them. They're just people. They're on the other side. They're scientists, but
what TNG generally works better. I mean, it's a talky show for anything else that it makes itself out to be. When it works best, it works as a talky show. So any time that there's a moral quandary, that's when it can thrive. And that's what elevates this episode partway through, is when you start introducing that element. And then having the characters be conflicted over the actions, as with O'Brien. That's what... I was going to say that's what elevates this episode over some of the others we've seen, but I mean... that's unfair, because that excuses the horrendous missteps of some of those other episodes.
I think it's clear that Gul Macet is very aware of what the Cardassians are doing in secret. But do you think that the other Cardassians are aware? Or, you have that one Cardassian who tries to access some of the information on the Enterprise's weapons. Is he aware that the Cardassians are rebuilding their army?
I think, we're given reason to trust and mistrust them, and that's fair enough. I think it is interesting that it's framed in keep the peace no matter what. It doesn't matter who's right or wrong, keep the peace. And that's the Federation orders. And it would be so easy to play this episode in the other way. Because in the movies especially, it's Kirk's the renegade or Picard's the renegade. They're going against orders. Those stuffed shirts that the Federation can go shove it up their arse because we're disobeying orders. And that's the heroes. That's quite often the heroes in a Star Trek type show. The slight anti-hero. In
the films, it would be Kirk or Picard in Maxwell's position.
Yeah. And so we're taking this character. I know this is the right thing to do. I know we are in the right. We've got the surety of it. And it's good that we can play that in a complicated way. And we can say, all you want is your vengeance and you're blinded to it. So, yeah, I like that interstellar politics is more complicated than we're right and you're wrong. It's having a conversation about it and also saying the cost of peace is sometimes higher than your moral assurance. And let's not forget that this guy does go around just murdering several hundred people with his more powerful starship.
And I feel like the seeds are sown here for Gul Dukat, because he is the greatest villain that Star Trek has ever had, in my opinion. And he's a character who always tries to reassure people, even his enemies, that he has their best interests at heart. When he's occupied Bajor, he assures the Bajorans that the terrorists are their enemy and that all the Cardassians want what is best for the Bajorans. And it's Marco Lamo who will go on to play Gul Dukat, playing Gul Macet. And you do see Gul Dukat in Gul Macet.
Yeah, I think you definitely do. He's got that charisma, and it's quite reptilian kind of charisma, and it's playing both sides at the same time, which is sort of a hallmark of that character. The belief that one is good, even though their actions prove otherwise, is interesting, and I think that's what makes the Cardassians so interesting moving forwards. But I suppose the other big character is Captain Maxwell on the ship with no other crew members.
You could argue he's the first McKee.
there's a lot of ideas in this episode, as you say. It's just a one-off episode, but it does feel like a lot of the ideas are ones that are built upon all the way through this era.
This one episode will inspire 14 seasons of Star Trek. Arguably, it's the most important episode of Star Trek ever made.
Yeah, I mean, this and Ensign Rowe next season are kind of pivotal moments in Star Trek. And the Cardassians themselves, they're a sort of corner of the universe that's kind of, we've seen Klingon stuff up to now, and we've obviously had the Borg, but the Cardassians, they're just one of the big corners that they will start to build up and create lots of beautiful pictures around, because they become the texture for Deep Space Nine and a lot of the stuff on Voyager as well. So yeah, it's an important moment. But do you think Maxwell's convincing? Do you believe him to be the hero? Is he the right kind of character? You've obviously got O'Brien to say as your reasoning for King. Well, this is a good guy. He's the right stuff.
No, he just came across as typical Admiral dickhead that we've seen multiple times before.
It's an interesting perspective that you have, Alex, because you don't have the hindsight of everything that comes after it with the Cardassians. So from me and Andrew's perspective, we look at Maxwell and we think there's justification to what he's doing because we know what the Cardassians are doing or what they're liable to be doing.
Yeah, and also the other thing is that we've talked on other episodes about what would an episode look like were it in season 1 or 2, maybe even some of 3, but mostly 1 or 2. And if this episode had been made in season 1, we wouldn't have had the rug pull at the end of the episode. The Cardassians would have always been peaceful and always been in the right. So had we not had the background of having watched all of series 1 and 2, I would expect that rug pull. Having had series 1 and 2, I was quite prepared to believe that no, it was the Federation at fault here. So then that colours your view a bit as well.
I think there's some maybe issues with the characterization as well, because there's a lot of spoken exposition. As we've said, this is a talky episode, so it's he lost his wife and child. Okay, there's your very basic psychological motivation.
Hey, they're dead.
But we don't really get any of that from him. We don't get his grief, and not that I want to see him kind of staring at a picture crying or anything like that. But I think he's such a minor character that what we know about him is we're told rather than we know. And when we actually get to meet him, he is just Starfleet Captain 65. He's just that another guy with his nice leather sofa in his ready room. But I think it's fairly effective because you still get the sense that he is doing what's right. But maybe that whole vengeance plot is too affecting, or maybe it is too simple. What if he didn't have any reason to revenge and he was just going around doing that? Is that more interesting? I don't know. I think in terms of like a screenplay, it does the job, but I do think he could perhaps have been. I mean, what would you do now if it was a TV show? You'd have some irritating flashback to their time together, wouldn't you? And it wouldn't really add any depth to it. So maybe if you can do it with dialogue.
You would open up with Picard on the Stargazer with a really bad wig.
No, you'd have him on shore leave being told about the incidents that happened. With some terrible de-aging. I think there's also an element that what you were saying about is oversimplified. Again, the way that this show has... I think most TV shows in this sort of realm try to present a worldview of some kind. I mean, it will always vary from writer to writer, but TNG has a sort of overarching worldview that it's presenting. And the way that all of the preceding episodes have gone mean that up until that end you would just look at Maxwell and say, no, he is in the wrong. And we support Picard's view. It's one that I think, yes, you do kind of have to review once it's finished. And it doesn't really give you much time during the runtime to make that assessment, because you're not in possession of the full facts until very late on.
We have the hindsight that there is eventually a war where the Federation and the Cardassians are involved against each other. And, a lot of people are killed. And there's a line in this episode from Captain Maxwell to Picard. "You're a fool, Picard. History will look at you and say, this man was a fool." Do you think that there are people who would look to the Dominion War and say, Picard could have helped stop this then?
It's sort of a question of stakes, isn't it? Because the idea here has been that there has been a war. But what form does that take? It doesn't seem to be taxing the Federation, because obviously when we see the Dominion War in Deep Space Nine, that tears the Federation apart, and the Starfleet is reduced in numbers massively, something which it basically doesn't seem to have recovered from in Star Trek Picard until the last episode. But here...
It'd certainly be ironic to discover that it was a very low-stake war, like the COD War.
Well, I wonder, is it a sort of low-stake war?
Just over fishing rights.
We've obviously been following the flagship of the Federation for the last 4 years. Has it never come up until now? Was it just, was there one little armada that was fighting? What are they fighting over? Is it territory? Is it people? And obviously there's interesting stuff comes up, but I don't think we ever get the sense of the war. Obviously we hear O'Brien, and we get the story of Stompy, who died. Stompy, who used to follow him around.
Is it not that the Cardassian War was bad for the Federation? Is it not that they've just had the Borg incident, and you have that line from the Admiral saying the Federation can't handle another war? So it's not necessarily that another incident with the Cardassians would destroy the Federation because of how bad the previous Cardassian War was. It's more they're not in a position post Wolf 359 to handle a war.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know about you, but I certainly got a bit nervous when an Irish man starts singing a song.
He brings out his potato casserole, starts singing a song about death. I mean, that's what you want when you haven't really shared any time with your wife. That's really a way to just feel the love tonight, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the minstrel boy has gone to war. An Irish patriotic song. It became a favourite of many Irishmen who fought during the American Civil War. So you've got that American-Irish kind of connection to it. But do you like that scene? I actually do like them singing together, because I think it does a lot of character work without, resorting to too much contrived dialogue. It's very much a neat way of showing a shared past and comradeship.
I'll be honest, I was mostly distracted by how much he kept going on about Captain Maxwell. Like that one, just Captain Maxwell. Mainly because being in lockdown as we are currently, I am subjected multiple times a day to the kids TV presenter Andy Day's programs on CBeebies, where a man has built an empire of shows that all have the same theme tune but different words. So there's Andy's Dinosaur Adventure, Andy's Aquatic Adventure, Andy's Prehistoric Adventure, Andy's Safari Adventure. They go on, and he has a boss in it that just keeps going on about how wonderful he is, and I just thought about that. I have to share this pain. I don't see anyone else. I can't leave the house.
Do you know, I guess it's quite interesting for O'Brien because I think he's a tactical officer. See, he was a bridge officer and an important person on a starship, and now he just stands at that panel all day waiting for someone to basically step...
The slow release of death.
Waiting for someone to step in a lift, essentially. It's just, I'll press the button for you, sir. Yeah. It's the trauma of war, isn't it?
And then in the spin-off Deep Space Nine, he will go on to fix an actual lift.
He started off on the bridge in Encounter at Farpoint. He got demoted pretty quickly, didn't he?
I like to imagine that Pat Farrell in Alpha Papa is actually just Miles O'Brien having, through some weird space dust, been sent back in time and forced to become a radio DJ in Norwich, and that Pat's takeover at gunpoint of North Norfolk Digital is a result of how he put upon he is here. Gets me through the day.
It's a good thought to have. Anyway, it's a fairly simple show, isn't it? It is what it is.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that when I was saying about it starts off and it's kind of frightfully dull at points at the start of it, is because it only becomes interesting once they really advance the moral quandary. And I kind of feel it's difficult. In some ways, perhaps they don't spend enough time on it, but then if you spent too much time on it, it would be like episodes we have in previous seasons where it just drags on for a very long time. I don't know what you shorten and what you extend, but the end result is fine. But you're right, it is very simple.
It's got a classic example as well of watching a battle take place on a screen. A very effective TNG technique. Do you think it would have been better to cut to the Phoenix at other points? Would you have wanted to see more crew members on the Phoenix, for example? Maybe all loyally following this great captain. Would that have been more effective?
Certainly the way that it's presented makes it feel like it's a one-man show. You don't get a sense of a crew, I don't think. And when you have an episode that has the rug pull at the end that this has, yeah, perhaps there is some scope that you can show a crew and you can expand on that element of who's in the right, who's in the wrong, and in the way that you were saying at the end of this, you have to reassess Maxwell's decisions. Yeah, maybe having some more characters that you have to do exactly the same with, maybe that's not a bad thing.
At that point, it becomes a two-parter, really.
Well, possibly.
In fact, it becomes a Voyager two-parter called Equinox. What I really like about the tactical display is when ships are destroyed, you have a nice little graphic of the dot exploding.
It works. I think that works. Do you know what? As a 45-minute story, I think it's all pretty effective. We can talk about how it would have been better or how it could have been expanded, but as an episode of a TV show, do you know, it's solid. It's better than basically fine.
Yeah, no, it's completely serviceable. It feels like it's part one of a two-parter, which in some respects it is, in that it's setting up for the future, but as you say, clearly it wasn't necessarily intentional at this point, so it does feel like maybe they rushed to the end a little bit, but it's a nitpick, I guess, really, yeah. Isn't it?
But I think we've kind of covered most of it. You know, there's no B plot. There's not a lot of characters in the episode. We maybe could have talked more about the Cardassians, but I'm not that fussed. Does anyone want to talk more about the Cardassians?
Of course, this is not the first chronological appearance of the Cardassians, because a Cardassian corpse appears in Enterprise.
Yeah, keep that to yourself. Right, well, let's see if we can unveil more Star Trek delights in the place we call Quickfire. Gates McFadden, who plays Dr. Beverly Crusher, does not appear in this episode, and none of us noticed.
The USS Phoenix according to Memory Beta, would go on to be destroyed in a Borg battle that takes place as an act of retaliation from the Borg after Voyager destroys a transwarp hub.
I love that they will give a future to a ship in expanded media just to destroy it. Marvellous.
The USS Phoenix survives the Dominion War.
This is Mark Alamo's third appearance in Next Generation, and he's played a different alien each time, but he will be back as a recurring to pretty much a regular on Deep Space Nine.
Well, before recording started, there was a momentary panic when I hadn't recorded an episode of this for so long that I had put the Nitpicker's Guide into deep storage, and in the absence of being able to find it, I just grabbed another book to try and take random trivia. But then it was okay because I refound the Nitpicker's Guide, but looking at it, it is just Phil Farrand complaining about lift doors. So actually, I'm going to return to my original book, which is Talking Cock by Richard Herring, with the fact that the Cern Abbas Giants, prior to 1908, his large chalk penis was 6 feet shorter than it now appears. Absolutely nothing to do with this episode, but a damn sight more interesting than anything Phil has to say.
The facial hair and headgear worn by Cardassians never appear again. And funnily enough, the weapons are pink, but then they're sort of orange in other episodes. That's some fun first-time Cardassian factoids for you.
In a deleted scene from The Wounded, O'Brien tells Keiko he may cook her a pot roast. If you want to have more information on pot roasts in the Star Trek universe, Memory Alpha has a page for pot roasts. Fill your boots.
Director Chip Chalmers observed, this episode... Chip Chalmers, I love that name. I imagine he's quite perky, Chip Chalmers. This episode aired during the Gulf War, and it was about Picard doing everything he could to prevent a war, happening during a time when the United States of America was doing everything it could to start a war. I thought that was a real interesting dichotomy of ideas. Thanks, Chip. That's us done for another episode. We're all off to eat a pot roast based on Chief O'Brien's mother's recipe. Delicious. She handles your meat. We will be back again where we will be talking about Devil's Due. So join us next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.